Welcome to another edition of the Willie Bragg Show here on KRTD, Saturday night edition. I am your host, Willie Bragg. I want to wish each and every one of you a happy new year. And in advance, apologize for being an hour late. Had some issues to resolve, but they got resolved and better late than never. And I hope, as I said, I hope that everybody's new year is off to a great start. And certainly not boring right now, as you can see during the week with what's happened with Kevin McCarthy trying to become Speaker of the House, and he finally did become Speaker of the House after a little bit of haggling with his fellow Republicans, which kind of fits into this story here about Force the Vote from 2 years ago that needs to be revisited, because it connects. And I will be referencing Kevin McCarthy occasionally, even though it's not necessarily going to be about Kevin McCarthy, because of Kevin McCarthy's ordeal that he went through this week proves what the supporters of the movement called Force the Vote were saying all along. And we were right. And the shit libs and the gatekeepers in independent media that the big names in independent media that said this was a wrong strategy were the ones that were wrong, and those of us who favor holding Nancy Pelosi accountable were the ones ended up being correct all along. So with no further ado, I want to go and talk about that. But before we do, please, by all means, hit that like button on my channel, on here on YouTube, on the KRTD YouTube channel. Hit the and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. You got to do them both. When you do so, it helps keep things intact. Follow KRTD Media on Twitter. Follow them on Facebook. Likewise, follow my channel on Twitter. Follow my channel on Facebook. And follow my channel also on Twitch as well. So there you have it. So let's talk about this issue about Force the Vote. And before we get to talking about the modern, this week's people on all sides revisiting that issue, we need to go back to kind of how this whole thing started and what exactly happened, where this idea that seemed to be unanimous on the left at one time became so freaking controversial. And I almost said a bad word, and because we have a new policy on YouTube, I got to monitor my language. So there we go. So anyway, thankfully I just caught myself. Well, okay, it goes like this. The left in America, what do we favor in terms of healthcare reform? At a minimum, if you are a leftist, you will favor Medicare for all, which basically means doing away with private health insurance and instituting a system of national health insurance. Single payer is what is normally been called, and we're now just calling it Medicare for all. It is practiced in countries like Canada. It's practiced in countries like Sweden, France, where the government runs the insurance system, but the healthcare system is left in the private sector. My plan is a little more radical. I will favor, in terms of the Western world, I will favor the British system, the National Health Service, or in the for those who are favoring a tanky worldview, what exists in Cuba, what they call socialized medicine. So you can say Cuba or you can say the UK. They kind of operate, believe it or not, with the same premise. It is a governmental run system where the doctors and the hospitals and the healthcare institutions are publicly funded solely through the government, the hospitals, the healthcare infrastructure, the medical workers, and the doctors and nurses are salaried directly by the government. So that's the difference between single payer that exists in places like Canada, France, and Sweden, and I would say the National Health Service, or what they call socialized medicine, in places like the UK, Italy, places like that, Portugal in the Western world, and in the world where you call the communist states. Places like Cuba will have such a system still intact. And anyway, I'm just kind of spelling out the difference between the systems. Not all universal healthcare systems are alike. Unfortunately, because of neoliberalism, a lot of healthcare systems in the Western world have sort of started to look more like Obamacare looks in the United States today. But they're still more public, and they still have a more public commitment than Obamacare. There's still a whole lot of private sector nonsense in the Obamacare system, no matter what the right-wing critics say in the United States. And here's the thing. It was created by the Heritage Foundation, which is why I told people a decade ago it should have been rejected to begin with. And it should have been rejected. So anyway, with no further ado, what I want to discuss this from the perspective of those in independent media. You're going to kind of hear a wide array of people on independent media, basically from some of the gatekeepers that you're going to see throughout the course of the video, and those who are, I would say, in truly independent media. And you'll see basically a diversity of thought, and unfortunately a division on the left on something that shouldn't have been a divided issue to begin with. Because honestly, here's the thing. 2 years ago, we had a pandemic. We still have a pandemic. But look, we were coming out of a pandemic, but we're still, a lot of people lost their jobs. We already had a healthcare crisis to begin with. You add to the fact employer-based coverage, people lost their jobs, and people were suffering and having horrible medical bills, medical debt as a result of COVID. It's just something that just came in uninvited in people's lives. So, and what happened? It made the point that it became a critical issue. Now, in theory, we know Republicans are not going to favor this. But in theory, the Democrats are supposed to favor some kind of response. And it went like this. The Democrats had their slim majority in 2020 as a result of the 2020 election was a slightly larger majority than what the Republicans have currently. And they could have used leverage to Nancy Pelosi to get some concessions out of her. And they didn't. Contrast that with the Republicans, who had less, their majority slimmer. And it may get a little bit more slim if George Santos is removed from Congress and there's a special election where the likelihood a Democrat will come into that seat in New York. But here's the thing. They use this tactic called force the vote that the left, in theory, was supposed to use. It was the right that used it to achieve their ends. Corporate Democrats in the last 2 years, Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin in the U.S. Senate, used force the vote to destroy Build Back Better. So you have two right wings in this country. You have the establishment Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who's now an independent, using their leverage for horrible ends to destroy Build Back Better, which would have made our lives better. And then you have people like the right wing in the Republican Party. I mean, you could say from the two factions, they have gotten concessions out of Kevin McCarthy. Marjorie Taylor Greene supported Kevin McCarthy. She got concessions out of him to make sure he received her support, and she was able to get what she needed out of him. At the same time, Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and some of the other band of crazies gotten concessions out of Kevin McCarthy too. Now, Kevin McCarthy's too conservative for me, but is a normie compared to all of those folks on the Republican side that I just mentioned. But he capitulated to these folks every which way but Tuesday, and buckled under pressure. And we couldn't do this to Nancy Pelosi. We couldn't do this to her. I mean, that, and having to hear the gatekeepers this week rub it in why it was ridiculous. No, it wasn't ridiculous. It was ridiculous that we didn't use it. So I will go and we'll start off with let's start off with Heartland's Media. I think that's probably be the way to start the whole thing, because they always got something to talk worth talking about. So let me go ahead and get this thing set up, and we'll listen to Kit Cabello and company have a discussion on it, and I will comment myself as well on this. Let me make sure we have the playback speed. Let's make sure that's on 1.25. So for the sake of time, and we'll get started right now. Let me make sure my screen is ready. It is ready. So let's go and do this.
Let's all do we can to build a better future. The critics of ForceTheVote were going to come out in droves and saying, Jimmy Dore wasn't right. Jimmy Dore didn't create ForceTheVote. Stop pretending that he invented this idea. First of all, to all the critics against ForceTheVote, we must not ever forget that at one point in time with ForceTheVote, people like Ryan Grimm, Fat Tony, Cenk Uygur, Sam Seder, were all on board with ForceTheVote. This is a fact. They were all on board with it. They agreed. And ForceTheVote is an effective strategy that was from the DSA playbook. Now, here's what Jimmy Dore and everyone else, Heartland's Media included, were asking for with ForceTheVote: to withhold their vote, the 15 congressmen and women, on the ForceTheVote petition, to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi so that Nancy would put Medicare for all on the House floor for a vote. Now, for those detractors saying, well, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. First, let's say it failed. If you were a smart campaign advisor, if you were smart in running your strategy and also rallying the progressive base and not killing it like Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement did, you would shine a light on all the heartless Democratic and Republican lawmakers that would not give the people health care at the height of a pandemic. Now, Jimmy Dore and everyone else who were calling for ForceTheVote, Heartland's Media, everyone that was involved in it, Justin Jackson, Brianna Joy Gray, Dr. Cornel West, we weren't telling the squad or the other 15 congressmen and women on the ForceTheVote petition to vote present. We were saying no. Now, there's a difference between a no vote and a present vote. Now, Fair and Balance explained this on our show on Monday, and she's explained it on her continuous live streams as well. A present vote means you nullify your vote. You are no longer a playable character in the field. You're out. And the only way an opposing party, let's say the Republicans at that time in 2021, could get the speakership is if enough Democrats were brain dead to vote present, which was not going to be the case. The only chance right now Hakeem Jeffries can become Speaker of the House is if enough Republicans are brain dead to vote present. That's not going to happen. What we're seeing right now in Congress is a continuous ForceTheVote withholding your vote. This is what it looks like. But then you have jagoffs like this, Ryan Grimm, who had the audacity to even, put on a fake mask for the for everyone who's been at least trying to get some kind of answers. Here he is, Ryan Grimm, saying, and again, horrible profile picture.
Serial killer.
Well, it is a horrible profile picture. Look at his haircut. My God, only Donald Trump's got worse hair than he does. But anyway.
Yeah, it looks like, no, it's a portrait of a serial killer. I am begging people to stop pretending that Jimmy Dore invented the idea of using leverage in the year of our Lord 2020. Who even writes that tweet? Ryan, you jackass. The criticism was always about the demand for a vote on the House floor that would lose by 200 at least. That's all it was about. No, Ryan, no.
Ryan Grimm is nobody to be respected. He is nobody to be respected. He's just like Nomiki Konst and Sam Seder and Shank and Anna. He's sold his soul. He's going to sound progressive and say the right things, but he's really they're the American equivalent in the media of what was called the Blairites in the UK in the 1990s and within the Labour Party. That sort of they're like the third way people. They're like the new version of the third way within independent media in the United States, and they're not to be trusted and they're not to be respected anymore.
That's not what it was about. If you're paying attention. And then there's people like this. Now look, Anna Kasparian has something to weigh in on this too. Because again, even the people at TYT failed to see the bigger picture.
Asks an important question. I actually was tempted in talking about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I decided against it. Now I'm going to. The question is, can you explain how this force the vote is different than Dems force the vote? There are lots of force the vote proponents who say AOC should have done what the Republicans are doing now with Pelosi.
Yeah, she sure have. If she would have, I would be still a supporter of AOC. But AOC not only did not support force the vote, but in every opportunity come along, she ended up giving money to corporate Democrats. She ended up voting for bad bills and then give some kind of rah speech and a lot of grandstanding. Couldn't even be bothered to support a union organizing effort, rather wear a stupid Chick-fil-A dress at a Met Gala ball. And I'm proud that I'm not using bad language so far. Yay.
In 2020. Well, remember, Force the Vote was about withholding votes for Nancy Pelosi's speakership role until she made the concession that there would be a floor vote on single-payer health care in the House.
Yeah. Is that so unreasonable, Anna, to hold Nancy Pelosi accountable, and that if she doesn't play ball, she suffered the consequences? And why would it be such a bad thing? How would it be any different that if Hakeem Jeffries would be taking over as the Speaker of the House? How would that be any different? I don't see, yeah, it is true. Hakeem Jeffries is a little further to the right than Nancy Pelosi. That is true. But not by a whole lot. And here's the thing. Force the vote was not tried. And I'm going to be stressing this in this video. Force the vote was not tried. We're nowhere close to having Medicare for all. We're nowhere close to having a public option. We're nowhere close to having meaningful prescription drug reforms. And you think about that for a minute. But your answer is, well, Jimmy Dore's a right-winger. Breonna Joy Gray is a right-winger. The Gray Zone are a right-wing. They're a bunch of right-wingers. These people are right-wingers. People who are trying to do actual left-wing stuff, they're the right-wingers.
I'm going to pause it here because I want to give my colleague Lauren a chance to give her a point of view on this one too. But I want to pause it here, folks, and explain this is what we're seeing the Freedom Caucus ask from McCarthy. Now, obviously, there have been 15 Republicans that flip-flopped and decided to vote for McCarthy now, but let's face it, this is what you do, Anna. You got to ask something and hold your leadership's feet to the fire. This is what it looks like. And the Republican establishment is showing us what an effective force the vote looks like. Lauren, real quick, I want to get your comment here.
Hold on, before she does that, let me just add to Kit's point. I don't like the Republicans. They're worse than the Democrats. I say this as an independent person. I do not belong to the two-party system. Yeah, the Democrats are marginally better on some social issues, and maybe even on a few economic issues here and there. Take your pick. But they're almost as bad as the Republicans, pretty much across the board on most things that really, really do matter in the bulk of what makes America America. And as much as I despise some of these clowns in the Republican Party in the U.S. House of Representatives, they're giving Kevin McCarthy, a hard time. I have to give them kudos. I have to give them respect that I can't give to the squad, because they're willing to go and take down Kevin McCarthy to get their way. For what? What policy difference? The only thing is there's no policy difference between Kevin McCarthy for real. Well, okay. Kevin McCarthy may bark in a less angry way than Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and the other crazies. I mean, he may come across as a little more civil. And I think that's really what it comes down to with the Republicans. They want somebody who's constantly angry and grouchy all the time and wants to bark and bite people's head off, verbally speaking. And that's what they want. They want angry. They want the package. They want the book cover. You heard of the saying, never judge a book by its cover. They want you to judge the book by the cover. They want that book covering too. And that's what it comes down to. Because as far as policy, they're pretty much on this on board. It's just that Kevin McCarthy might be a little more polite about it, and they don't want politeness. They don't. Of course, I mean, I'm one that don't like civility politics either. I do find civility politics as hypocritical, but I will let Lauren let her see what she's got to say.
I mean, yeah, it seems like they gave up. It's what happened. It's like, well, we're gonna lose it anyway, so who cares? And then everyone is like, well, it wouldn't have worked anyway, so why try? But that seems like a terrible message. I guess it's like, because it's clear that, like, yeah, it doesn't take that many people to actually potentially affect some change. Like, if the Republicans are managing, they're blocking this for now, and it's not taking too many people. It's just, they're forcing Kevin McCarthy to concede stuff. They're going to force change to happen the way they want it to, essentially. And so it's like, for all of the pundits or whatever who have been saying, like, oh, well, it just wouldn't have worked, so, like, it doesn't matter that the Democrats didn't do it. It's like, it can work. And it's like, just because you think it won't isn't a good reason not to try anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing. I mean, the Democrats, the progressives, people who are supposed to be our allies, the faction of the Democratic Party, shall I say, they're supposed to be our allies in Congress. They're supposed to be the ones holding the feet of the fire, the feet. They're supposed to be holding accountability, holding their feet to the fire, the Democratic leadership. Even a streamer like Bosch, that I despise, said in the late summer and the fall 2020 that once we get Biden in the White House, we can go and annoy the Democrats in Congress and annoy the president until they give us what we want. I mean, in a way, you can almost argue in a way that someone like a Bosch would have been arguing for something like a ForceTheVote back then that he is so passionately against. And to anybody here, if anybody, I urge you to go on his chat line and to go and troll ForceTheVote until he can't stand it, because apparently nobody hates the discussion of ForceTheVote more than Bosch. So I just decided to let that out as a caveat for everyone here. But getting back to Anna Kasparian, she, just look at her. Like, she is so correct about her position on ForceTheVote. No, Anna, you're wrong. You're wrong, and you let it's either that Katzenberg money that they gave y'all in 2016 that kind of ruined the network, plus the Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, you got to join the resistance at all costs. So you end up sounding like MSNBC, like a hipster version of MSNBC, and it's why TYT sucks these days. And now remember, there was a time TYT didn't suck. Now, that's not to say that TYT are incapable of doing decent stories, but but TYT is certainly has gone downhill from where it was at. Even 3 years ago, even 2-3 years ago, TYT was still. I could still watch TYT in spite of their opposition to force the vote, and find something positive to get out of it, but not really anything today. I mean, I don't even subscribe. I'm not even subscribed to TYT now, so that shows you where things are at. So anyway, everyone, when you get a chance, and go ahead and subscribe to Harlan's Media, a good channel to listen to. They're doing the work that the Young Turks should be doing, but are not doing. So there you have it. So let's go with our next story here, with the main instigator of them all. Now, the misnomer, there is a misnomer, and the misnomer is that, well, Jimmy Dore was the one that invented force the vote. So those that hated the idea of force the vote, there's a lot of folks that hate force the vote because, they associate it with Jimmy. There are people out there, not all, but there are people out there that believe that Jimmy Dore invented the idea of force the vote. And honest to God, he did not invent force the vote. Force the vote was created as a concept by Democratic Socialists of America. They created that, and they talk about a time where they could possibly use leverage to go and force members of Congress to hold themselves accountable to acquiesce to our demands. And then once there was an opportunity, most of DSA had cold feet. Now, I know that there are individuals in DSA that are like, yeah, let's go full steam with force the vote. So this is not. I'm not here to badmouth everybody in DSA. I have been a member of DSA. I'm not a member of DSA presently. I'm not a member presently. With the rail strike vote that AOC and company did in 2022, that matches, to me, it's right up there with Reagan's busting the air traffic controllers in 1981. It's right up there with Margaret Thatcher busting the miners in 1985 in the UK. That's what it's equivalent to. And to see the squad had their hand in this, minus Rashida Tlaib. She did the right thing. I'm going to give her a free pass on that one. But the rest of the squad, and what the best they could do, DSA, is to sit there and to give them, like, tap them in the hand and say, naughty, naughty, naughty squad, don't ever do that again. This. If I was a member of DSA, I would resign. I mean, honestly, I would resign from DSA if I was a member at this point. So, and again, I know people from DSA. I have been around DSA circles quite a bit in my life. A lot of people in DSA are decent people, but there's a lot in the top of DSA that are just out of touch, and they could do so much more with the organization. I tried forming a DSA local years ago, 15 and 20 years ago, and I had no help from the national director at the time, and it was by design. But anyway, that's history right there. But again, they associate this with Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore did not invent the concept of force the vote. He just thought it was a damn good idea. And I can say that word, by the way. That's not going to demonetize. I had to monitor myself, folks. So, yeah, he thought it was gosh darn it, it was a gee golly whiz good idea to go and do force the vote. And so there were people that associated Jimmy Dore with force the vote, and they're like, ooh, get that away from me. Because some people suffer from Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. Now, I don't agree with everything that Jimmy Dore says. I don't agree with anything that anybody says. I don't agree with everything that I say. I mean, there are positions I have now that I didn't have a few years ago. We all evolve. We're we're all complex creatures. We human beings are complex creatures and individuals with our own, we all have our own individual realities, and we evolve. So, but on the force the vote thing, nobody's ever been more correct on this issue than Jimmy Dore. And people like Jimmy Dore and people like Brianna Joy Gray and all the other folks out there who were strong advocates in independent media for this tactic called force the vote. Now, I do know a few exceptions for those who are against force the vote, that they're not bad people. I just think that they were misguided. But I really do have an axe to grind with people who are against force the vote as a general rule. Anyway, we will go and we'll share that story right now with Jimmy Dore. So let me get that on. Let me find that. Let me go ahead and let me get that. Let me go ahead. Oh, here it is. All right, and we'll get started momentarily. Okay, and let me get that speed up to 1.25 for the sake of time, as I said. And yep, as the title said, McCarthy's speaker fight proves Jimmy Dore was right about force the vote, and he was.
So what's going on today? I'm here with Aaron Mate. So you know what's happening in Congress right now. So they can't elect a speaker because there's a handful of right-wing Republicans that have demands, and they're asking for something for their vote. And what they're doing is they're proving this show right. This show, the idea which came from Malcolm Fleishner, he was the one who pointed out that the squad, because the victory of the Democrats in Congress was so narrow, so small, that they could demand things, and Nancy Pelosi couldn't get elected without their vote, so then they could demand things from her for their vote. This is exactly what the Matt Gaetz and the right wing is doing right now, the Freedom Caucus is doing right now to Kevin McCarthy. And so the Republicans are currently doing what I was told could not be done and was performative. They are extracting concessions for their vote from speaker, or as AOC calls it, violence. Okay. So watching the force the vote strategy work real time for the Republicans after the squad's excuses for not doing it turned out to be lies. It's something special. Now, even MSNBC has noticed this, and they're going to talk about it. Watch this.
The reality for Kevin McCarthy is Pelosi's nightmare back from 2019, as I'm sure you'll remember. She was, of course, elected as House Speaker when Democrats took back control, but progressives, newly elected progressives, led by folks like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, were openly skeptical of Pelosi's leadership, whether she should be Speaker at that time, whether it was time for generational change, and whether they would vote against her. AOC actually voted for her at that time, and Republicans booed her on the House floor for doing so. But all of this sort of shows that while Pelosi was elected Speaker at a time of these sort of left-wing rebels, that so-called squad never ended up being the threat to the Democratic Party that these right-wing rebels are ending up being to McCarthy and the larger Republican Party. And we're seeing that play out in real time yesterday with this Speaker fight, and we're going to see this continue as they try to govern through the 118th Congress.
And that's the thing right there. I wanted the squad to make Nancy Pelosi's life impossible. And the other corporate Democrats, I wanted I want Bernie Sanders there to make the Joe Manchin's lives and the Kirsten Sinema lives impossible, and to make Joe Biden's life impossible and Kamala Harris's life impossible. But they just sit there and do nothing. Now, in Bernie's defense, there was a time he did make people uncomfortable, but he decided to just play along to get along, and that's horrible. Being just a slightly better Democrat doesn't cut it for me. It shouldn't, and it should not cut it for anybody. And and Bernie should lead by example, because if you go and you're a troublemaker, you can probably convince the squad to be troublemakers, and the media will hate you for this. They will hate you, Bernie. They hate you, and the squad they put up with the squad because the squad are fairly well behaved, but they would, if the squad would misbehave and cause a ruckus, like AOC says she was urging several years ago, what would happen would be that the media would hate them, and they would not be invited to the cocktail parties, and they, and a lot of access to what goes on in DC, they will be cut away from. But you know what? The people will realize that, and they will embrace them as populists, and history will write them in a positive light. And they don't see that. I don't know why they can't see that. They will be looked upon as brave, principled people. And you will want the media to hate you, and to sit there and to ignore the very people that brought you in there. Independent media, you can't even go. They don't even go on the gatekeepers programs anymore. That's considered too fringe for the squad, and so it shows you how out of touch they are. And it used to bother me to criticize them, because, like, what if they get their act together? What if they get their act together and do these things? I'm going to feel bad if I'm sitting there bad-mouthing them. But I don't feel bad bad-mouthing them, because we're not getting any results. So anyway, hold on. We will let Jimmy Dore continue.
It looks like the right wing of the Republican Party is going to do exactly what we all thought and expected that the left wing of the Democratic Party would do, meaning the Justice Democrats, the squad, but they never did do it. And why did we think they would do it? Why did we think that they would do what the right wing is doing right now? Well, because they said they would. So here we go. Here's AOC when she was trying to get your vote.
We can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. Not even a floor vote that gets voted down. We can't even get a vote on it.
Oh, I thought we had her in here calling it it stopped a little quick. We had her calling the Democratic Party a center-right party. Fuck, we stopped that clip too quickly. But here she goes. She says it again here.
What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all. We can do it now. It takes political courage. Start bringing the ruckus on the Democratic Party. That is our job. It's great that everyone thinks these issues are important. We need to make them urgent. This country has only ever changed for the better by groups of people that were willing to put everything on the line for a better future.
Now, she revealed she wasn't willing to do that, nor is anybody in the Democratic Party, including Bernie Sanders, who claims he's not in the Democratic Party, but he's the biggest water carrier there is for corporatism and war. So Brianna Joy Gray went to Bernie Sanders as press secretary when he ran for president last time. And I think she's seen the light. And so now she was for Force the Vote, and she's going to explain it in a way that's better than me, right? Because, I'm a pothead comedian and a C student, and I'm sure she went to Harvard or something like that. She's really smarty pants. And so she's got it together, and let's just listen to it, and we'll stop and start it. But she really nails it. Here we go.
Let me explain. In 2020, the situation was reversed. Democrats had a small majority in the House, such that a handful of progressives, squad members alone, had enough votes to hold up Nancy Pelosi's nomination to lead the House. There were plenty of reasons, by the way, to do so. For one, AOC had previously gestured to the fact that she found it incredible that Pelosi had never faced a real speakership challenge in all of her years. Moreover, we were at the start of a COVID pandemic and at the tail end of a progressive presidential campaign that delivered unprecedented public support for Medicare for all, along with other progressive policies. Did Bernie's loss mean that the movement representing a majority of Americans was supposed to die? And during the pandemic at that. Since Trump was still president, Democrats were still pretending to care about COVID deaths. And before the vaccines, when even young and healthy people were finding themselves hospitalized or even dying from COVID, there was genuine energy around using the public health crisis as a springboard for improving our public health system, which, by the way, is the most expensive in the world, despite yielding worse results than peer nations. Disgruntled progressives who made up a significant part of the Democratic Party base had dutifully voted for Biden, despite warnings from folks like myself who said that doing so without establishing some conditions would mean that Biden would ultimately betray most, if not all, of his campaign promises. And in the weeks after the election, progressive YouTube Politico and comedian Jimmy Dore floated a simple idea to get something in return for those very progressive voters. An idea, in fact, that he gleaned from the DSA's own handbook. That is, you guessed it, force the vote. Progressive squad members could leverage their speakership vote to extract concessions from Nancy Pelosi. Now, unlike Republicans now, the left's asks were to be substantive, not just procedural. One key ask was a vote on Medicare for all, which was intended to keep the fight alive and draw contrast between Democrats' claims that they want to improve healthcare for Americans and the fact that they repeatedly kill Medicare for all legislation as quickly as they receive money from the pharmaceutical industry. If you want to understand why the vote for Medicare for all was such an important ask, just look at what's happened over the last 2 years. Look at how California, with its Democratic supermajority legislature, killed a statewide Medicare for all bill, or consider how silent all of the squad members have been about Medicare for all since the end of the Bernie campaign. Did 68,000 people a year stop dying from lack of health insurance, or did it just become uncool to talk about it now that we're outside of a fundraising cycle? Now, some of us, fearful that exactly this would happen, rallied over the holidays in 2020, staffing phone trees and calling progressive Congress members furiously about the plan, and even planning rallies. As left media figures debated the merits of the plan, people like David Sirota offered constructive additions to the ask, including a suggestion that Pelosi be forced to oust corporate Democrat Richie Neal from the Ways and Means Committee, where he was poised to stop progress on healthcare reform.
And then David Sirota then came on this show and bullshitted that Kevin McCarthy could become speaker and ran interference for that squad. But anyway.
Yep. And I remember that once Force the Vote was defeated and all, I remember that there were marches for Medicare for All being discouraged by the gatekeepers in independent media, the big names in independent media, with the exception of Jimmy Dore, of course. And a few others. There's a few others in there, but the point is I'm trying to make is that the TYTs and the Sam Cedars and the Nomiki Kants who blocked me the other day, you have integrity when Nomiki Kants is blocking you on Twitter. But anyhow, these people were sitting there scoffing at Force the Vote and scoffing at these Medicare for All marches. Say, oh, they're a bunch of right-wingers. Or they got some right-wingers out there in that march. Hey, if some right-wingers are convinced that Medicare for All is a good idea, maybe they're doing something right. Because, I don't particularly like the politics of the right wing, but you know what? If a right-winger gets sick, I want them to have free medical care, just like the progressive would have free medical care. It's called Medicare for All for a reason. It's for all people, everybody. Medicare available to every man, woman, and child in this country. Guaranteed from the day you're born to the day you die, with free of cost or as very low or as very close to free as possible. So that's what it means to have Medicare for All. And, I'm glad that it's not considered all that fringe of an idea anymore. Because there was a time when I favored this approach and people looked at me and they thought I was nuts. Well, you can't do that. I'm talking about, really, I got rained down like a ton of bricks at meetings at the college Democrats for bringing up the subject, occasionally during the healthcare debate time period when Hillary Clinton was the first lady and head of the healthcare, the National Healthcare Task Force. Anyway, yeah, so that's Jimmy Dore and of course Brianna Joy Gray. And she's probably one of the most eloquent voices for Force the Vote out there. Probably even more so than Jimmy Dore, in my opinion. Jimmy Dore is associated with it, but I think that she actually makes the best case for it. I'm not saying that he doesn't make a good case for it, but I don't see how anybody could think that it's a bad idea after listening to her to talk about it. So, but anyway, I want to before I go on, I just want to mention that on KRTD now we have what is called super chats. So I just want y'all to keep that in mind. So now that now we have over 1,000 subscribers, yada yada, you know how it goes. So keep in mind that we have super chats. So I just wanted to just kind of throw that out there right now for everybody. So what I want to do is we're going to continue with Brianna Joy Gray. Speaking of Brianna Joy Gray from Bad Faith Podcast, and she had Kyle Kalinske and Justin Jackson, both proponents of not just Medicare for All, but Force the Vote too as a tactic. And in spite of, I don't hear from Justin Jackson anymore for whatever reason. I guess he must have given up BreadTube. But I remember he had up to like 12,000 subscribers. Then he just quit. I don't get it. But I guess he was bored and all that. So, but anyway, suffice to say, in spite of all the letdowns lately on Kyle Kalinski's cringe positions, the one thing I can say about him, and I can say this about him, is that he's always been a proponent of Force the Vote, and he supported the Medicare for All marches. So anything that is kind of considered not in his favor now these days, what will remain positive about Kyle, that can't be taken away, is his position on Medicare for All and how to be strident in trying to achieve it. And Force the Vote and Medicare for All marches is one way to go about it. And so anyway, this is from a couple of years ago on Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast. So we'll let them have the chat up on this issue, and then I'll go ahead and share my thoughts too.
Dropped out. I've been waiting for them to do a thing. I've been like really willing and ready to defer to anybody else. But then nothing happened. And we had the biggest protest in American history, and nothing happened. And no one ever tied any of the concerns of the people in the streets to demands of Joe Biden. And then there was people act like I showed up a month before the election and was like, let's withhold our votes for Biden. No, I wrote my litmus test article in like June, and that was already late. That was after I'd already been thinking about this for months. And nobody, I talked to someone in Black Lives Matter world, and they were like, yeah, actually, that's kind of a good idea. We never really thought about withholding the vote. I'm like, are you kidding? So at this point, I feel like any trust that they've earned has been lost from me. And what it feels like is when they say things like, it's activism, it has to be organizers, they don't mean it. They just are throwing that out there to stop you from advancing any kind of plan that's in the alternative.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, if we just spent like a fraction of the energy that we're all spending talking about whether or not this is a good idea, actually seeing how many people we could mobilize into direct action, we would be miles ahead. But I can't get any activist types to call me back or respond to my DMs or interact with me at all. We are so used to trusting these people. Me too. I've been deferring to them. I love them. Rah, rah. I trust them. But like, that's dangerous. The same way we didn't push back against Bernie when sometimes it would have helped him. The same way that we all thought Obama was going to be God's gift to humanity and let him get away with murder, literally murder, for many, many, many years. Yeah. I'm not Jimmy Dore. I'm not saying AOC's trash, throw her out, blah, blah, blah. But like, this is the first time in 2 years that anyone's asking to hold them a little bit accountable, and people are losing their minds.
Yeah, so here's some interesting stuff that I could tell you from being on the inside of all this when we launched Justice Democrats and we were having the original meetings as to the idea. And one of the original names that we were going to go with, you're going to find this interesting, is Left Tea Party.
Huh.
The idea was not originally to name them Justice Democrats. We were thinking Left Tea Party because the whole idea was to be a Tea Party of the left.
Yes.
And so there's a lot
actually shake things up.
There's a lot that entails, right? Like, the idea was, let's make Democratic leadership hate us in the same way that John Boehner and Republican leadership hated the Tea Party. And the reason John Boehner and Republican leadership hated the Tea Party is because they made his life miserable. Because they wouldn't go along to get along. They wouldn't just do whatever the Republican establishment wanted. They were like, no, we have demands. Here are demands, and you're going to meet them, or we're going to make your life a living hell.
Right.
And that's the thing right there. And I mentioned this a couple of years ago, just talking with people online on Facebook. The problem with the movement, there needed to be movement equivalent to the Tea Party to make life a living hell for the Democratic establishment, in the same way that the Tea Party made life a living hell for the establishment members of Republicans at that time, the congressional Republicans. And they're like, some people push back on me. And I'm like, that's terrible. That's negative. You just can't do that. That's not what we're all about. And that's why we can't get anything done. This is why America can't have nice things in this country like they have in other countries, where when you're born, you have health care. You have health care to the day you die. When you work, you have 5 or 6 weeks paid vacation each year. You can go on freaking holiday, as they like to say in other countries, on holiday. Sometimes I say that on purpose where I'm at, just to see what people say. Oh, I'm on holiday instead of I'm on vacation. This is why, when they retired at a young age, and they could go and enjoy the good life, and they're not working until they're 70 years old. Even though we have Social Security here, I mean, they have raised the Social Security full benefits to what was it, 67 now, and you can get it partially at 62, which I'm going to go with 62 myself. And I've been told, no, don't go with 62. I'm going with 62. I'm closer to 62 now than I've ever been. So, you know, it's just a little more than 8 years away from me. I want it so bad that I earned it. I got a pension waiting for me at that time. I'm ready for it. So, but these things are not an issue elsewhere, because a lot of this stuff is just there. It's taken for granted. And we can have this as guaranteed nice things in this country. And the thing is, it's because we are plagued with civility politics in this country. Everybody, you know, we have this, how dare you, have you no decency kind of attitude. And to a degree, as negative as Donald Trump can be, and you know, if you're a Democrat, or if you're, you know, a liberal, progressive, or even if you're a corporate Democrat who thinks that Donald Trump is a savage with bad manners, you know, you look at him, he had no filters. Okay, I get it. And then he brought a lot of people out of the woodwork, all with even more less filters than he has, and more obnoxious than him. Then they could say on the other side, well, you got Bernie, which there's perhaps maybe an argument, but Bernie's still too freaking nice at the end of the day. And that's, if I have anything against Bernie, is his empathy. Empathy is what makes Bernie suck. I mean, you know, the Amazing Atheist said this one time, that the perfect politician would be Bernie Sanders on policy, because on policy, Bernie Sanders is second to none. And I'm saying this angry with Bernie, not him wanting to run in 2024 for president, because I don't want him to run for 2024 for president. I'm on record saying that I don't want him to run in 2024 for president. If I lived in Vermont, would I vote for him for re-election for senator? Sure. But here's the thing. Someone like Bernie Sanders on policy, with no filters, very dismissive attitude that Trump has, with a mean streak that Trump has, that's what you will want in a politician. And somebody with the rudeness and the douchiness of Donald Trump, but with the awesome policies of Bernie Sanders, you can get a lot achieved like that. And so, unfortunately, Bernie Sanders lacked the empathy, and he has too much empathy. He lacks the mean streak in him that it takes to achieve these things. And civility politics sucks in this country. It really does, because civility politics is basically just a way to be polite about, you know, screwing everybody over. And if you dare buck the system anyway, you get pearl clutched, and they go and wag the fingers at you. So that's what it comes down to. So let's continue here. I pontificated enough. So,
and it's not just doing that for the hell of it. It's doing that because you actually have certain things that you believe in deeply enough to cause that trouble for.
Yes.
And so that was the original idea, that we were going to call it Left Tea Party. Then we started bouncing other names out there. One was like New Deal Democrats, and we didn't like that one. Eventually, we settled on Justice Democrats. But in my mind, and in Jake's mind, and in everybody's mind who were the original founders, Shoykot and Zach Exley, the idea was we need people who not only are right on the policy issues, but they have that backbone where they're like, no, I want people in the system to hate me because the system's broken and corrupt and terrible. And if they hate me, I wear that as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, listen, there's always internal arguments. Like, of course, people are going to act in ways that we don't agree with, or take certain positions we don't agree with, or have a strategy we don't agree with. And that's all fine and dandy. But like, to be at this late date, the thing that I realized, that I recognize, that I'm seeing is, and Jimmy's wrong on the intentions point. It's not that they mean bad.
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, or that they're corrupt, or that they sold out. In fact, the exact opposite. They did not sell out. They're not corrupt. But
I think that they did sell out at this point. This is from 2 years ago. They sold out at this point. I mean, they may in their heart of hearts still want the same things that they wanted 2 or 3 years ago, but they like the money, they like the glamour, they like the lifestyle, they like the they like the glitz and the glamour and the trappings of what it means to be a member of Congress. So no, they sold out. They did.
They most certainly got Washington brain, which is like they've now been convinced that no, it is better to fight from within the system and do a tit for tat thing behind closed doors with Pelosi and like go along to get along, and then if I do something for them, then they'll do something for me. And that's fundamentally the wrong model, because they're always going to hate you. They're always going to stab you in the back. The way that you fight leadership is to leverage the one tool you have, which is the bully pulpit. And they never use that bully pulpit. They never use the public pressure when that's their only tool.
That's the point. Like, and here's something that's really getting to me, guys. Some commentators keep saying, okay, but they don't have power. They don't have power because they can't win the vote. They can't win a prospective vote. So what's the point of doing it, right? Like, to them, power only means they can successfully execute a Medicare for all vote and it comes out, well. But they're missing the idea that what power they do have in this moment is to hold Nancy Pelosi's speakership hostage. That's actual, real power. A small number of progressives, which is all we have, is a small number of progressives can actually bend her over the proverbial barrel for something. So if your analysis is all about power, and Ben Burgess keeps pretending like we're doing magical thinking, like we think that the problem here is that they won't will it. They don't have enough strength of will to will Medicare for all into existence. Which, to be really honest, I find to be deeply patronizing and disrespectful of the intellect and thoughtfulness of everybody who's engaging in this argument in good faith. I just want to say that because I think that we should be able to have this conversation without kind of this patronizing mischaracterization of what everybody's arguments are, accusations that we're doing volunteerism and all of these. I'm sure that points that score really big in your philosophy class or your debate class or whatever, but have no connection to anything that anybody's arguing what's going on right now. The case that is being made is that, I will speak for myself, is that there is a disconnect between what voters want and what politicians are willing to fight for, Democratic politicians. And the reason why Democratic politicians don't suffer as a consequence of not doing what their constituents want is because the media is complicit. They never highlight that gap. People don't even know that a majority of, or about half of Democrats in the House don't even support Medicare for all. They don't believe that Medicare for all is as popular as it is because nobody ever popularizes the statistic that almost 90% of Democrats are on board and nearly 50% of Republicans are on board. And everyone is able to hide behind the idea that they can't back this thing because it would be electoral kryptonite. And that's what all of that hand-wringing after the election was about, where they were all shouting about how Medicare for all and defund the police is what caused the down-ballot disaster, which is patently untrue. Right? We all know that all of the Medicare for all supporting people in swing districts won their races. And it was all of the blue dogs who were trying to thread some neoliberal needle that lost. Right, okay? Yeah. So the idea is, how do we expose that gulf? How do we create accountability for the Democrats in the House who do not support Medicare for all? And I don't know any other plan. I can't control the media. I can't get on MSNBC. But what we can do is use this moment where 14 million people have been kicked off their health insurance, popularity for Medicare for all is at an all-time high, and we have some of the most popular figures in the House who ostensibly support our political agenda. Who could, in this moment, fell the most powerful and one of the least liked members of the House in Nancy Pelosi, who 3/4 of Americans think should step down, and exploit bipartisan dislike of this woman to draw attention to the fact that she has been presiding over a House, over a chamber that has been ignoring the needs of its constituents, Democrats and Republican voters alike.
There's a lot I want to say in response to that. First of all,
let me just interrupt for a second. I actually even said this about Medicare for all, force the vote. I think that they would have done force the vote. Obviously, the squad would have been in favor of going ahead and voting for Medicare for all if Nancy Pelosi would allow the House to vote. So my point is, I'm going to tell you how I think it could have been achieved, Medicare for all. Medicare for all, I kind of think it could have been achieved this way. Harp on the fact that it is a pandemic that we're getting over. And not only do we already had a healthcare crisis where people are without healthcare or underinsured, but you also had a whole new group of people who are unemployed without health insurance, and their previous jobs, they had their health insurance tied in with their jobs. When I hear right-wing people say universal health care is slavery, that is just a stupid argument, because really it's involuntary servitude when you're tied to a job that you despise because, hey, if you leave your job, you lose your health care. And that's what's happened. So you had I don't know how many millions out of work, but you had enough that it was a crisis, enough of a crisis that I think that not only would the progressives have done it, but maybe some of the corporate Democrats who may not really like the issue would think, man, if I go and vote against this, I could lose in this next election. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound weird. Maybe some Republicans might think the same thing. Well, gee, if I don't vote for Medicare for all in this pandemic with people suffering, we normally don't like governmental overreach in my district, but we got a lot of people suffering in my district and they need that health care. I think it could have been done, honestly. And if it wouldn't have been done, this is what Nancy Pelosi could have done. She could have made a deal with the squad. Hold on, let me get to my face in a minute here. She could have made a deal with the squad and say, well, we can't do Medicare for all, but we will push for a public option. I mean, I think that maybe it's a possibility that the squad would acquiesce and said, okay, all right, if you promise that there will be a work toward a public option, like maybe lowering Medicare eligibility down to 55 or 50, we'll go and vote for you. You got to go and have something. Let them give you something, or prescription drug reform, something. What did they do? They were like, well, maybe if we just, we don't make any fuss and we just sit here in the corner and we go and kiss up to Nancy Pelosi and kiss up to Joe Biden and kiss up to Kamala Harris. And we tell them, we love y'all. We think y'all great. We think you're so wonderful. Yes. Joe's my good friend. And Kamala, she's great. She's great. And Nancy Pelosi, when we worked together in the U.S. House, she was totally base. I mean, doing that shit, shucks. Doing that shenanigans, shall I say? Doing that shenanigans. That's why we're saying was the reason why, proved that it was a failure to sit there to do nothing about it. And that's what it came down to. The shenanigans of playing nice to get along, to play along. Unacceptable. And because I'm kind of I feel like I'm committed to saying this to everybody occasionally. We do have super chats. I just wanted to say that. So, and any, just to keep that in mind. And wanted to say that, because we're over 1,000 subscribers at KRTD Media. So I just wanted to make that appeal to everyone here. They would appreciate any donations, any help. So sure, on watching this stream through KRTD Media, just kind of remember that, I guess. So anyway, but let's get back to the Bad Faith podcast, and then we'll continue with my thoughts. So hold tight here. All right, let me get back here. Okay.
I just want to offer an olive branch to the people who don't agree with us for a second, because I do think that on the merits of the argument, a lot of them can be convinced. And in fact, you're evidence of that, because you wrote an article and somebody said, like, I didn't believe in this position until I read Brianna's article, and now I'm in favor of this position. Right. So I'm actually more optimistic on this than you would think, because I do think that, and even the people who are really disagreeing with Jimmy, a lot of what they're saying is like, man, I really dislike Jimmy as a person, and he really goes way too far with a lot of these criticisms. But on the actual issue, yeah, I kind of agree with it. So there is hope in the sense that you actually can get some degree of leftist unity around this issue if the proper arguments are made, and that's what we're here for. So, so the first thing I want to say is I do not question anybody's intentions or anybody's motivations who are on the other side of this argument. I mean, there's...
I do. I question 95% of the people who are opposed to force the vote because they, at best, they think that playing nice is going to get us what we want. And at the worst case scenario, they're out there to just they're being paid off to a lot of them are being paid off just to be control opposition and to try to sedate this leftist movement that's been growing since the last decade.
There's certainly corporate Democrats who would take the opposite position, and I do question their intentions and their motivations, but I'm not talking about corporate Democrats. I'm talking about other leftists. So I don't question other leftists on this. I think that everybody is saying what they really believe, and there is a difference between who's the enemy who I'm trying to defeat and who's an ally who I need to convince. And what I'm going to do right now is try to convince the people who are our allies. And there's two ways of looking at this. One of them is the principal argument, which I can get into, and then the other argument is the strategic argument. And you were alluding to there that Ben Burgess wrote an article, and he sort of was dismissive of the idea that there's any strategy involved in this. There's definitely a strategy involved in this, and I definitely didn't give it its due diligence. But let me go to the principled argument first, because I actually think that is persuasive alone to a lot of people. Okay. So the principled argument is, to steal an old Martin Luther King Jr. quote, the time is always right to do what is right. Okay? 300,000 people, now 315,000 people are dead in a pandemic. At least 15 million have lost their health insurance during this pandemic, and the economy is getting obliterated. Medical bankruptcies is one of the top causes of bankruptcy. The rest of the developed world has one form of universal healthcare system or another. We don't. So, if not now, when? If not now, when?
Right.
This and draw some history.
Never. At this point, if you couldn't do Medicare for all in a pandemic when there was a need for it the most, such a monumental need, probably equivalent to World War II in Great Britain. And you know what? During the war in Great Britain, when Great Britain were fighting against the Nazis, the three major parties in Great Britain at the time, the Labour Party, obviously, the Conservative Party, and the Liberal Party, they endorsed the Lord Beveridge report in the House from the House of Lords, recommending a national health service. Yes, somebody from the House of Lords urged the creation of socialized medicine for the people of the UK as a priority after the war. And the three political parties in the UK was a mixed cabinet in the British government. Prime Minister Churchill, Deputy Prime Minister Attlee, who became the Prime Minister after World War II, the first real socialist government in Britain after World War II that did the socialist things. But suffice to say, all of them would have brought the people of Britain a national health service because it was promised. It was promised. And there's been no serious attempt to take down the NHS in the UK. The closest thing was a woman named Liz Truss who expressed animosity toward it last year when she was briefly a prime minister for 45 days, and she's no longer the prime minister, shall I say? But we have Great Britain, where you had Boris Johnson, he is theoretically Britain's Donald Trump, thanking the NHS for saving his life when he got COVID. Contrast that with Joe Biden, who was going to go and veto Medicare for all if it comes to his desk, if the House and the Senate was going to vote in favor of it. That tells you, that speaks volumes right there. That speaks volumes what's going on. But anyway,
historical parallels here, right? Yeah, it's easy. If you live in Mississippi in 1960, it's really easy to be like, I really am in favor of desegregation, and somebody could laugh at you day and night and say, how ridiculous are you? How long have we had segregation for? And you want to change segregation? What's wrong with you? Do you realize how pie in the sky and idealistic that is? You can make the same argument. Imagine in 1918 talking about a woman's right to vote. Right. Somebody could laugh at you and say, what do you mean women right to vote?
And they did.
They haven't voted this entire time. What are you talking about?
And they did
it's
the year before suffrage, they had a vote on suffrage that failed, a floor vote on suffrage, and then the next year it generated the kind of activism and attention to the issue that they were able to get it the next year.
So, and listen, I don't know if people will find this controversial if I say it, but I'm going to say it because I think it's true. I really do think that universal health care is on the same moral plane as ending segregation and getting women the right to vote. I really do.
It
and
is.
For some reason,
and it's more popular.
Yes, right. But for some reason, the default assumption from a lot of people is that somehow it's not on that same moral plane, or if it is, maybe it's not as clear terms, but it really is. So anyway, that's the principled argument that, like, if not now, when? And we have to take this on because as a matter of principle, it's the right thing to do. Now let's get to the strategic argument, because I actually think that's maybe even more interesting. The strategic argument is, it's incredibly pragmatic because these tactics actually worked for the Tea Party. If you fight for what you believe in, and you're unapologetic about it, and you crusade for it, that's actually virtuous in and of itself. And so there's a reward that's gifted to you from your base of supporters if they see that you have the courage of your convictions and you have the backbone. Even if you lose, they go, wow, they were fighting for healthcare for me in the middle of a pandemic. And the only tool that the left really has is public pressure. That's all we have. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez
she has too.
She has the most Twitter followers of like anybody in Congress. The other members of the squad are also wildly popular. Nancy Pelosi is wildly unpopular. Okay, right. Nancy Pelosi's power is derived from being a Machiavellian backroom deal cutter. That's where her power comes from, and corporate money, of course. She rose her way, the ranks through the party because she sold out the most and because she shook the most hands behind the scenes and made the most connections. You're never going to beat her at that game. Negotiating behind closed doors with them is never going to work.
And that's why I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker of the House. And because there was a time that Nancy Pelosi supported Medicare for all. There was a time that she supported Medicare for all, and how sad it was that she ended up turning against something that she claimed that she was in favor of. So anyway, we'll that was from the Bad Faith podcast from a couple of years ago. On that Bad Faith as well with Brianna Joy Gray, she did have a discussion with Sam Seder on ForceTheVote, and Sam Seder was in favor of ForceTheVote initially, then he turned against it. And some people think it was a phone call. Some people think it was because he hated Jimmy Dore. It was all kinds of things, but since I was playing Brianna Joy Gray, I figure we'll play some more Brianna Joy Gray because she has Sam Seder on, and I figure just for the sake of levity, you just need to see how Sam Seder responded to her. So here he is with Brianna Joy Gray, and why I can't believe that I used to sit there and watch Sam Seder and thought, wow, this is a guy that knows what he's talking about. Yeah, he's just basically. I don't know. He sucks. But anyway, here's Brianna Joy Gray.
I think we can talk about the effect of Jimmy Dore's argumentative style on this discourse.
It's not an argumentative style.
Okay,
I don't mind his style. I think that when you put out and make the argument over and over again that she's a sellout and they're a fraud, I think that does damage.
We can, and we should talk about that. But that's different than making an argument for why ForceTheVote is good or bad. And
if you ask me why I didn't support it, that's why. Because I didn't want to associate myself with a attack.
Okay, so that's honest. That's honest.
Oh, yeah.
You're not saying that you actually think that ForceTheVote was an ineffective strategy or a bad idea. You didn't like that it was associated with Jimmy Dore.
I thought, like I've said this 3 times on this, and I thought it was a middling idea. When I found out that they were leveraging other stuff that I thought had more material benefit and not.
It doesn't have more material benefit. Because they could have asked at least for you to get rid of all
You and I have a disagreement. I believe that PAYGO, exempting PAYGO,
they did exempt PAYGO.
Excuse me. At a time where we desperately need funding, we need expansion on all sorts of things, ranging from expanded unemployment insurance. We need checks. All of that. I think that was a valuable get.
It was valuable. It wasn't a get.
Huh?
It It was valuable, but it wasn't a get. You have no knowledge if their failure to force the vote resulted in getting those things, if those things were already planned concessions or not. Moreover, part of my demand was to get rid of PAYGO entirely. So if we're talking about the material value of either of those things,
yes, your demand was you. Look, I'm saying there is an argument, okay, but neither one of us knows how much you could have leveraged at this point.
Well, here's
you want to argue that you think that their negotiations, that their ask wasn't big enough. Fine, I don't have
that is what I'm arguing. Here's why.
But as to why I wanted to distance myself as fast as I could, because I'm not going to be part of a project that disempowers for what I think is a highly speculative tactic that I think is dubious, frankly. But again, I was perfectly willing to just let 1,000 flowers bloom. Like you said, there was no strategy on my part to go like, I'm going to support this so that Bree signs on to it, for instance, and then I'm going to pull the rug out. No, it was and to say that Jimmy's not associated with Force the Vote.
I didn't say that Jimmy's not associated with Force the Vote.
To say that he wasn't the biggest advocate or the person most close to associated.
Very central to it. It was his idea.
That is why when he started to use it as a leverage to disempower the progressives in Congress, I decided I'm done.
So I'd like to address that point, if I may. I don't believe that Jimmy is trying to disempower the progressives in Congress. What I believe Jimmy is doing, whether or not you agree with him or the tactic he's using, is trying to use his platform to pressure the elected officials, the progressives that we have worked so hard and have this unprecedented number, to your point, in Congress, to do the thing that we want them to do, which is to use power when it falls in their lap. Now, in this instance, we didn't need to get a majority of progressives in Congress to enact the plan. That was the whole spark and magic of it. That with a very small number of people.
Well, let's take that first premise that you made, the assertion that you don't think Jimmy's agenda is to disempower progressives.
I'm sorry. Which way is this going to go? I feel like I'm in the middle of a point. I feel like I've been letting you.
Okay, go.
If I could just finish this point. I have like a whole notepad of notes that I'm trying to catch up on from the various issues that you brought up that I think are important to address. Jimmy's perspective, I don't want to speak for him, but it seems obvious to me what he's doing is to be the farthest, angriest version of the left, to create political pressure on progressives to do what they said they were going to do when they ran for office. One of those, AOC in particular, since she's come under focus, said that she wanted to oust Pelosi. She complained just this past January, a year ago now, that it was regrettable that the Democratic Party was so moderate, so to the right, that we couldn't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. That's almost a direct quote. So what Jimmy's trying to do is say, I don't care about AOC per se. I don't care about the squad per se. I'm invested in these individuals insofar as that they're advancing the interests of the progressive movement and are fighting tooth and nail for the policies that caused us to support them in the first place. And he is willing to become the antagonist in that by being the most ferocious attack dog to push them where they need to go. If AOC were to say, hey, this is my plan for Medicare for all, and demonstrate a fighting spirit, there's no one in this world, I think, who would imagine that Jimmy Dore would just randomly keep antagonizing her for no reason. No, doesn't have a vendetta out against AOC. Whether or not I think that his approach is most useful is a different question. But he doesn't have a vendetta out against AOC because he hates her or something. It's because he simply wants her to conform with her own campaign promises.
Okay. And again, this is what I call from what's his name? Sam Seder, an example of the Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. That's what it comes down to more than anything else. To me, in my opinion, is all like just like, ooh, is this loudmouth jack off comedian that in his garage smoking weed, this dirtbag leftist, king of the dirtbag leftist guy, Jimmy Dore, he's going around, advocating this, get this crap away from me, and that's what it comes down to. And same thing with most of the people who are in favor of forced to vote. That's what they associate this stuff with, and as I said, it is really a sad state of affairs. I mean, I kind of long for the days when we were all on the same side, trying to fight to get a socialist in the White House. Back in 2016, I long for those days. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying those were the good old days, but I guess that's what I'm saying, because I feel like that mindset is gone, and the only place it exists is outside the two-party system, and is in the real alternative media, not your TYT Sam Seder boutique left land that's out there. That's part of it right there. So but I thought I'd share a little bit of a comical take, because just to see Sam Seder squirm. Of course, he's going to squirm because he's facing Brianna Joy Gray, and Brianna Joy Gray gets a lot of bad rap from people. She receives a lot of attacks, but honestly, she brilliantly analyzed a lot of things that needs to be said and done better than most online left commentators out there. I've been actually watching a lot of Brianna Joy Gray lately. I was always a fan, but I've been getting drunk on Brianna Joy Gray more lately. So anyway, Due Dissidents, Keaton and Russell, they had a discussion about it. Oh, and they will be a guest on my show, the Willie Bragg Show, on January 16th. They will be a guest on the Willie Bragg Show. They'll be joining me for an hour. We'll be having a discussion and all of that. So I'll be glad to be chatting with them. So anyway, we'll let Keaton and Russell talk about this situation, because it's not just Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. There's also a growing Brianna Joy Gray derangement syndrome going on, and Anna Kasparian is one of such person that suffers from it, as well as who else suffers from it? Cenk Uygur, when he viciously attacked her on TYT, The Conversation, this past summer. So anyway, we'll let these two guys take it away.
So everybody, last night, Kevin McCarthy finally secured the number of votes necessary to become Speaker of the House, only after a very dragged out fight with the Freedom Caucus, led by Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, who launched their own version of a Force the Vote campaign. This, of course, renewed debate on the left side of the aisle, when many in independent media 2 years back pushed the Force the Vote campaign of their own. Now, that didn't go anywhere because our squad isn't as tough as the Republicans' squad, but many in independent media were really pushing them to grow a spine and force the vote back then. So we are more or less all versed in what happened back then, but I do want to play this clip of Brianna Joy Gray, because she not only gets into the merits of Force the Vote, which we've all heard a million times, but she calls out some of her indie media peers in this segment of her monologue about having flip-flopped on the strategy. So let's take a listen.
Instead of choosing that moment to fight, to highlight the corruption of the Democratic Party, and to lead a genuine populist movement that stood a chance of waking people up to the limitations of the two-party duopoly, something curious happened. A call seemed to go out to leading figures in the progressive media that they should drop Force the Vote. Although I first heard of the idea from Sam Seder, host of the YouTube show Majority Report, who said he supported Jimmy Dore's idea despite having a long-standing feud with Jimmy. He quickly changed his tune, alluding to a call he'd received that discouraged this approach. A call from whom? We could only guess. The legacy left media all quickly turned against the idea, with large accounts like the Young Turks, Majority Report, and others spreading outright misinformation about the risks of what might happen if the squad declined to vote for Nancy Pelosi.
All right, and that misinformation that she is referring to is, of course, the fear-mongering that Kevin McCarthy, at that time the minority leader, could have become Speaker of the House. And she goes on to mention, as we've mentioned, look what didn't happen this time. Hakeem Jeffries, despite being the leading vote-getter in the first dozen-plus rounds, didn't end up Speaker because he never had a majority and never could have a majority.
And here's the thing about that. Democrats and Republicans, as long as you have a two-party system, there would never be an opposing party leader as Speaker of the House with the party's majority, unless there is any, some people sitting it out voting president. And they will be held to pay if they did that. If they vote president, they'll know who voted president, and they will be held to pay for those members who voted president. So for Republicans to be worried about Hakeem Jeffries becoming Speaker of the House, that wasn't about to happen, and they knew that. But why the heck were Democrats worried about Kevin McCarthy being Speaker of the House when the Democrats then had a larger majority than the Republicans do currently? And it's just like, come on now, basic political science. You would know that the scenario of Kevin McCarthy being Speaker 2 years ago wasn't about to happen. And for those that just want to be partisan Democrats and have everything as window dressing, rah rah rah, Nancy Pelosi, don't care. I don't, as far as seeing her, politically fall on her face. If we couldn't have gotten a roll call for Medicare for all, seeing her politically destroyed would have been just as awesome, at least for 5 minutes.
That's what she was referencing there. But she calls out her fellow indie media people, including Sam Seder and the Young Turks. Now, right around this time, of course, TYT is covering this whole thing, mocking the Republican clown show. A clown show, meaning debate and argument, right? That's that
like democracy,
right?
And I agree, it's like democracy, and it's what they're supposed to do, to debate and all that. But it is a clown show because they are, it is a debate, but it's a debate about nothing. I mean, it's not over policies; it's really over style, in my view. But in substance, what these two guys are saying, it's still correct.
Democracy, like people arguing on the House floor. You ever hear that thing where the Senate is a deliberative body, the House, the Senate, the halls of Congress, it's a forum for debate, negotiation,
actually exercising their constitutional rights and duties as elected officials.
Right.
What an idea. Gosh, they never did that in the founding of the nation. It was never conceived to be done that. They had no arguments.
I hear that the Constitutional Convention was just one afternoon. I heard they met for a half an hour.
Yeah,
and they
had some tea. They were still kind of British back then.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the fact that this debate has been revived isn't lost on the audiences of a lot of these shows. And so Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks,
very embarrassing for them. And that's why, if you're wondering why they're attacking Brianna Joy Gray so much right now, I don't want to overuse this term because it seems like a term that really bubbled up from the shit libs and they really overuse it. But come on, man, these guys are grifters. Majority Report, TYT, they're grifters.
Yes, they are. And it's a funny thing about the term grifters is that usually, and not in Russell's case, but usually when people's, not in the case that he's using it here, because when he's using it, he's actually telling the truth. But when people do spout the word grifters on both sides, they usually mean that it usually doesn't mean anything. And usually it's all about nothing. It's an empty term, basically.
And this whole thing is the worst thing that could have happened to them. They are furiously trying to control the narrative because now it is so obvious that they misled their listeners. Even the kindest possible interpretation that they were mistaken, they won't admit it. They won't.
Yeah, that's true. This is a public relations disaster for TYT and Sam Seder and all the others. And they're trying to save face about it, and them being very, very strident this past week about how correct they were about force the vote when they weren't, just make them look like bigger dorks than they actually are. these days, referring to Sam Seder, referring to Nomiki Konst, referring to Cenk Uygur, referring to Anna Kasparian, referring to Ryan Grimm, all of these folks.
Well, if they came out and said, you know what, guys, we were wrong, that might actually give them a little bit of credibility.
Good point.
But they don't realize that. So they're furiously trying to spin this, but it's unspinnable. It's so obvious that they were completely wrong. And it's pretty obvious that they functioned as controlled opposition. And what Brianna said there, that Sam got a phone call, they got a mysterious phone call. That's about the worst thing you could be accused of in an alternative left space. This is very bad for all the bad actors at that time.
Well, here is a call in to TYT. It was a super chat, which whoever gave TYT a super chat, I mean, come on. They got $20 million in a duffel bag from Jeffrey Katzenberg for giving them super chats. I mean, really.
Oh, by the way, thank you. Super chats, KRTD Media, we do have super chats. I just wanted to let y'all know about that. So we'll continue. And there you go. Take care, and we'll continue.
I'm gonna give you a little fun fact here. So sucker, actually, it's well known that in New York, Yiddish kind of entered the English language through the Jewish immigrants. We don't talk as much about how Gaelic entered English through New York. So sucker actually comes from sukar, which is Gaelic expression, kind of meaning a fat fellow ready to be fleeced like a sheep. So that guy's definitely a sukar who gave TYT a super chat.
Well, they got on the air, whoever they were, because they asked Anna, hey, maybe was Force the Vote not such a bad idea after all? Now, keep in mind, this was a few days ago. This was before McCarthy won, right? McCarthy won last night. So this was a few days ago. Here's Anna Kasparian on Brianna Joy Gray and Force the Vote.
I want to read one super chat because it asks an important question. I actually was tempted in talking about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I decided against it. Now I'm going to. The question is, can you explain how this Force the Vote is different than Dems Force the Vote? There are lots of Force the Vote.
Oh, okay. Let me do this real quick. I'm so sorry. Let me do this real quick. First of all, thank you, Snork Y2K for the $2 super chat. I just want to say thank you, and I'm going to scroll back, and we will listen to what Anna has to say. Sorry about that.
Hey, maybe was Force the Vote not such a bad idea after all? Now, keep in mind, this was a few days ago. This was before McCarthy won, right? McCarthy won last night. So this was a few days ago. Here's Anna Kasparian on Brianna Joy Gray and Force the Vote.
I want to read one super chat because it asks an important question. I actually was tempted in talking about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I decided against it. Now I'm going to. The question is, can you explain how this Force the Vote is different than Dems Force the Vote? There are lots of Force the Vote proponents who say AOC should have done what the Republicans are doing now with Pelosi in 2020. Well, remember, Force the Vote was about withholding votes for Nancy Pelosi's speakership role until she made the concession that there would be a floor vote on single-payer health care in the House.
Yeah. Remember, I think you said, Anna Kasparian, that you're in favor of single-payer Medicare for all. I think that Cenk Uygur said he's in favor of single-payer Medicare for all. And so why not hold Nancy Pelosi accountable and force her to have a House floor vote on single-payer Medicare for all?
Which would have failed. Okay, so the ask...
I don't care if it would have failed. It would cost... You know what? I think it might have possibly passed. But even if it would have failed, it would have been okay. You know why? People in this country, the Medicare for All marches that you saw this in 2021, you'd have probably seen it like 5 or 6 times 10 times larger than that. You might have actually seen hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, D.C. demanding for Medicare for all. It could have come to this. You want your politicians to be scared of the people. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the politicians to be accountable to the people. And, this sort of sophisticated sort of, well, let's go and try to be nice and say pretty please, or only talk about it privately in a few circles or campaigning to a certain constituency. and then not bringing it up. It's not the way to go about it. I don't want to be a team player, Anna.
Was for a vote that would fail. I mean, I at this point, I almost just wish that it would have happened, because I would give anything to have Brianna Joy Gray move on with her life and maybe talk about something different. Like,
the Brianna Joy Gray talks about a lot of things on her show, but she also talks about Force the Vote because it was the right thing to do. She was correct to support it. Jimmy Dore was correct to support it. It's not just Jimmy Dore and Brianna Joy Gray. I mean, you and Schenck were in good terms with Kyle Kalinske at the time, and he was a fervent supporter of Force the Vote. I'm not too jazzed with what's his name, Jordan Sheridan of Status Quo, but I'll give him credit where credit's due. He was in favor of Force the Vote. I don't know what the position is of Chapo Trap House, but I would imagine they'd be, but I have no way of knowing. But there were people out there that were in favor of Force the Vote. Chris Hedges was in favor of Force the Vote. Revolutionary Blackout Network was in favor of Force the Vote. Cornel West was in favor of Force the Vote. So Force the Vote was the way to go. I mean, not this let's go and do nothing, because doing nothing is resulting in what we have now. Nothing. There's no Medicare for all. So if Force the Vote wasn't going to bring us Medicare for all, where the hell is the Medicare for all now? Right now, where is it? I don't see it under this computer over here. I don't see it under my cell phone. I don't see it under this microphone. I don't see it in your blue background over there, Anna. Where the heck is our Medicare for all?
It's ridiculous. But this McCarthy situation is different, because the concessions that McCarthy has agreed to don't even matter for the group of Republicans who refuse to vote for him. Okay? They don't care about the concessions. They don't trust him, and they've said so.
And we should not trust Nancy Pelosi. We should not trust any of these corporate Hakeem Jeffries or any of these corporate Democrats. Heck, fire. We shouldn't even trust Bernie anymore. We shouldn't even trust the squad. You yourself lost it and went and had a meltdown. And look, I know your hair bun was tight that day when you had your meltdowns. It must be uncomfortable. It looks uncomfortable. But I know when you're ticked off and the hair bun is tight in the back, I know that must really just get you all angry and everything. I would be too, I guess, because you look like you're in pain. But the thing about it is that you don't trust any politician. Hell, it's hard. I used to trust you guys at the Young Turks. I used to think, hey, y'all were the ones that kept me sane during the Bush Cheney years and during the Obama years. But y'all are just, I mean, Young Turks, TYT's garbage these days. I mean, it's basically MSNBC for hipsters. Of course, I used to actually have nice things to say about MSNBC, but no longer either.
They don't trust him. They're not going to vote for him. It's not about concessions.
Okay, so now we know for a fact that is complete horseshit. It was about concessions. Now, you could say she didn't have the foresight to know that he was going to win. You didn't need the foresight to know that he was going to win in order to know that, yes, it was about concessions. After the first day of voting, after McCarthy lost 3 times, and then they said, okay, let's take a break and come back because it's too embarrassing. We can't have him lose 8, 9, 10 times on the first day, right? After they took a break on the first day, Lauren Boebert went on Fox News, and she told this to Bret Baier. She said, just last night, 2 colleagues and myself walked into Kevin McCarthy's office and presented him a very common sense proposal, a deal that got him 218 votes, the gavel on the first ballot, and he smugly rejected that. So what was the deal? She says it was very common sense things like putting forward a border security bill, putting forward a term limits bill, having a measure in place where any member of Congress who offers an amendment to reduce the federal debt, well, that's made an order. And there were so many other things that were common sense and even requests that he had made of us that we presented to him. And right now it is seeming very difficult for Kevin McCarthy to come back around and pick up those votes that I had in hand for him last night. So Lauren Boebert tells Fox News, no, I met with him the night before with a list of demands. What were the first 2 demands? Let's check the transcript one more time. A border security bill and a term limits bill being brought to the House floor for a vote. Now, she was not demanding that McCarthy whip enough votes to pass both of those bills. She was simply asking him to guarantee that those bills would be brought to a floor vote.
Now, I'm no fan of Lauren Boebert, but I'm just listening to one of those demands that was being made. Term limits, I'm kind of okay with. So as much as I dislike Lauren Boebert, and I do, I'm okay with term limits. Of course, we know she doesn't mean that because many, many times before the Republicans took over in 1994, they used to talk about term limits almost nonstop. I remember in the 80s and early 1990s, they talked about term limits nonstop. And as soon as the Republicans took over the House and Newt Gingrich became Speaker, you hardly ever heard anything about term limits. Now, I was always for term limits, even when I was a partisan Democrat in the early 1990s and thought I was going to be a Democrat to the day I die. And I always thought it just made good sense and it's good politics to be for term limits. You know, yeah, you have term limits for the presidency. You have term limits for Congress. I would say have term limits for the Supreme Court, considering where the Supreme Court is. I have a feeling that if we had term limits, I have a feeling that the insurance lobbyists and Big Pharma will not have as much of a grip on our politicians as they have currently. So, strangely enough, I think that term limits might make us. I'm not going to say it will get us to the universal health care, but it might take a tippy toe step in that direction. It could. I'm not. It certainly wouldn't harm any efforts of getting us in that direction. I will put it that way. But I'm overthinking this, and it's kind of late for me. And I'm going to wrap this up in a moment because it's almost close to midnight here, and I got to go take care of the chats too, and talk to everyone.
Right. So, and even if they pass the floor, the Democrats have the Senate. So they're demanding bills go to the floor that won't pass.
Right. Exactly. So it's the exact same. It's the exact same dynamic as Force the Vote, right? And as we're going to find out in a few minutes, they got both of those concessions and more. But let's let Anna finish first.
The whole Force the Vote thing was about an ask that would have ultimately failed and could have potentially hurt single-payer healthcare or the pursuit of single-payer healthcare.
Oh, yeah, because we got it now. I mean, single-payer is on its way, right, Anna? I mean, yeah, obviously, it's going to hurt single-payer if we did Force the Vote, because we would not have single-payer if we didn't do so, if we did Force the Vote. If we don't do Force the Vote, single-payer will be around the corner. It's not on my ring light. It's not in my doorway. It's not in the hallway. I don't see it. Where's the Medicare for all? I'm asking again, Anna. I'm asking again.
Because maybe some who might be open-minded to it would be less open-minded to it if it's already failed through a House vote.
I mean, this is not even.
God.
I mean, that is just unbelievably twisted. I mean, I don't even know where to start with that. Yeah,
it's so dumb. It's such a dumb take. This entire segment is just unbelievably stupid. There's not one thing she says that even makes sense on its own premises. It might have hurt Medicare for all, but no, because everybody thought that most of the people in Congress are completely uncorrupted by the insurance industry, and that Medicare for all, you know what? It got voted down. I guess we need to move on. No, that's how you build momentum. You fucking idiot. If people thought like this in the suffragette movement, you wouldn't be on this show because you wouldn't have the right to vote, Anna.
Look, whatever you feel about the Medicare for All ask is really besides the point. You and I didn't think the Medicare for All floor vote was the best ask. We didn't even think there should have been an ask.
No. We thought that they should have just made Nancy Pelosi a non-starter.
Exactly. Basically, just deny her the vote outright. Don't make any demand. Just
although I'll grant you what they did to McCarthy, if that was part of what they got out of him. Pelosi, of course, always being protective of her own power, she changed the rule. It used to be that anyone could demand a vote of no confidence in the speaker. She changed it to it has to be fully half of the party that the speaker's a member of have to vote to do that.
Right.
They got McCarthy to go back to the one vote rule. Now, if they had demanded that of Pelosi, and they had the credibility to threaten that, because if they had put her through that to get the speakership, they would have had the credibility to threaten to use that in negotiating. Okay, then maybe you could have put Pelosi in.
Well, look, these are debates that you could have, right? Nobody was saying everybody had to agree on what the ask should be. But that wasn't what their concern was.
I thought it should have been a lot more than Medicare for all. And these people are losing their minds over that one simple, basic, obvious, very light ask. Really,
well, they're pretending to lose their minds over it because they think that they can trick their audience into thinking, oh, well, that vote would have failed anyway, so it wasn't worth doing. That's why
they just didn't use force the vote on anything. But Joe Manchin used force the vote. Kirsten Sinema used force the vote. Marjorie Taylor Greene used force the vote on Kevin McCarthy. Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz used force the vote. Everybody used force the vote except for the left. And this was something that was designed for the left to get the left to get the establishment to do what we need to have done to meet our demands. So anyway, and that, of course, that was the segment there from Due Dissidents. I urge y'all to follow them and support them. They're growing channel. Always good program to listen to. I listen to them whenever I get a chance, and there will be a guest on my show on January 16th. In a few days, JB from RBN, James Fauntleroy will be my guest on the Willie Bragg show, from the JB Font show. So and we'll have some other guests and surprises coming up in the next few weeks. You'll see. So anyway, so we have here Mortra says, I'm with you, Willie. Hey, Mortra, how are you doing? Two right-wing parties. Yep, that pretty much is it. Yep. Dems are even worse on some issues. They become the war party. Yeah, it's basically they seem to just there's a compulsive contrarianism. If one party does one thing in one era, the other opposes it, and then they trade on those ideas because in the name of partisan hackery, of course. Let's see. Rowan Miller says McCarthy obeys Pelosi. McCarthy obeys Pelosi. He is a never Trumper, Lincoln Project type. Well, man, maybe so. And Rebecca, I know you, Rebecca. How are you today, Rebecca? Glad to see you here. Let's see. Glad to catch this. I'm glad to see you here, Rebecca. Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna have to. Yeah, next time I'm going to go. I'm planning to go to DC in February for an anti-war rally, and so I could probably either on the way or on the way back drop on by, and we can hang out. So I'll talk to you later about that. So let's see here. Les Bones says Willie Legend. Hey, Les Bones, how are you today? And Willie is a fucking god. Says extra booyah. How are you doing, Warren? How are you doing? I'm looking forward to the secret show next week. Yeah, I mean, I am. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh yeah, we have here Skywarp. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you today? One thing I wish more YouTube leftists would mention is modern monetary theory and how it shows us how easy we could have Medicare for all right now. Steve Grumbine talks about this a lot. I'm going to have to check that out. Grumbine. All right. That sounds like it could be interesting to watch. People like Kyle Kalinske and others propagate the myth that federal taxes fund government spending. This is not the case because we have a fiat currency. I've heard the debate about gold standard versus our currency. I'm not an expert on that like I should be, I guess. Peter Kyle says MAGA is more progressive than progressives. What a time to be alive. Well, all kinds of MAGAs. They got a coalition of people, so there's an ideological diversity within that coalition. Kyle Crystal and others, says Skywarp, important voices need to acknowledge modern monetary theory. By not doing that, they're hurting the progressive movement. And I'm going to have to learn a little more about the monetary theory myself. So let's see here. True. We can print as much money as we want. Inflation is a false flag for corporate austerity. Let's see here. That was Roland Miller. And let's see. String Gumbine has 2 YouTube channels, Real Progressive Actions and Real Progressives. He is also on Status Quo. He does the best job at showing the importance of modern monetary theory. Well, I will have to check out String Gumbine. Let's see. Even the Libertarian chair expressed openness to M4A. I had a discussion with a socialist years ago about libertarianism, and he said he would join the Libertarian Party and accept the program of the Libertarian Party if they could just change their position on healthcare, which I kind of, I respect that position, and he's speaking as a left libertarian, and I have not talked to Ken in years. I need to get back in touch with him. Steve Grumbine supports ForceTheVote, and he understands how easily our government can afford to pay for it without additional taxation. But that sounds good. Yeah, let's see. Nice. Let's see here. I meant to say that Steve Grumbine understands that we can afford Medicare for all without additional taxation. Let's see here. I figure I'll check them out. Yeah, I'm curious myself. So, yeah, I'm definitely curious. And we have here, Matt John says, "Hey, rad homies, peace and love." Well, peace and love back. Solidarity, Conrad says. Roland Miller. And Snork Y2K says, yes, at least bad actors. Yep. And John Padmore says, Willie, you're not drinking. Well, not right now. Maybe later on. Kevin McAlphin says, terrible political theory. I'll give the bill terrible optics. Let's see here. And Rowan says, Brianna is okay on some issues, but she voted for Biden and she'll for Fauci. Brianna, I don't think she voted for Biden. My understanding, she says she hasn't voted for a Democrat since Obama. She supported Bernie twice in the primary. So let's see. The Forever Love, Willie Rocks. The Forever Love. Oh, that sounds like a musical group. Let's see. Well, after they're all clowns, just to be sure, or would be crooks. Well, yeah, they all are. And of course, I thank Snork Y2K for the $2 super chat moments ago. And let's see here. The way to go says Forever Love. Let's see. Laughing out loud. Let's see. Young Turks was probably always control. I think they are now these days. Term limits are based. Yes, they are. Gaetz and Boebert are anti-war on the Ukraine. Yeah, but Lauren Boebert wants Biden impeached for pulling out of Afghanistan. Now, he should be impeached for getting us in Ukraine, but not for pulling us out of Afghanistan. So how anti-war is she? She wants to keep us in Afghanistan, So let's see. I am anti-war. I am with anti-war people against pro-nuclear World War III person of any stripe. Yeah, same here. I'm planning to go to an anti-war march called Rage Against the War Machine, and I'm probably going to be doing a commentary on that in a couple of days. So maybe tomorrow I might do a commentary on that tomorrow or Monday. Now that I think about it, if I could remind myself, because I do think that it's important that we go to as many anti-war rallies as possible. And anyway, so I just wanted to say to that since it's being streamed on KRTD Media, to give them a like, and to also give them a subscription. Go ahead, subscribe to their channel, hit the notification bell, the whole 9 yards. Follow them on Twitter, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Follow my channel on here on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Follow me on Twitch, follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, all the appropriate platforms. So if you like what you heard, please press like and comment. If you disagree with what I have to say, comment anyway. We will have a conversation. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it, because we are, in fact, the muckrakers of our time. And as I said, feel free to share what I have here. Always reject corporate media because they have nothing to offer. Try to get a second opinion, a 20-second opinion, a 220-second opinion, if you will. And again, as I said, just subscribe, follow me here on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook. Same thing with regard to KRTD Media. And I will conclude by saying to y'all to have a great evening. And we'll see you all next time, next Saturday. Take care. Next Saturday here on this show. You'll see me stream onward from time to time throughout the course of the week. But every Saturday, it was supposed to be at 9 to 11, but I had a glitch earlier. And so I started off 1 hour later than usual. That's not going to happen again. So I'll be back here at 9 o'clock next Saturday night from 9 to 11. So y'all take care. Happy New Year to y'all. And remember to keep fighting the good fight.